So, what is a prophet to do when they feel like God has completely overstepped the bounds of an acceptable amount of compassion and grace? Now, Jonah had left the city and found a place east of the city. He made a booth there and sat under it in the shade until he should see what happened to the city. The Lord God provided a ricinus plant, which grew up over Jonah to provide shade for his head and save him from discomfort. Jonah was very happy about the plant, but the next day at dawn, God provided a worm which attacked the plant so that it withered. And when the sun rose, God provided a sultry east wind. The sun beat down on Jonah's head, and he became faint. He begged for death, saying, "I would rather die than live." Then God said to Jonah, "Are you so deeply grieved about the plant?" "Yes," he replied, "so deeply that I want to die." In the Hebrew Bible, booths are a thing. The Israelites lived in these temporary structures during their 40-year sojourn through the wilderness. Then every year there was the Festival of Booths, also called the Festival of Tabernacles, where every Israelite was to come to Jerusalem and live in these temporary structures once again for the week. Our Jewish friends still do this and are quite specific, and there are quite specific rules as to what constitutes a proper booth. So Jonah builds a little structure, a bivouac or lean-to, if you will, and he looks down on Nineveh to see if anything will happen to it. God has already pronounced his forgiveness of Nineveh, and Jonah has already voiced his displeasure, but perhaps they will falter and God will destroy them anyway? You do get the sense here that Jonah is just waiting for the fire and brimstone to start raining down, hoping that the fire and brimstone will start raining down. And just like God provided a fish to swallow Jonah whole, God also provides a plant, a large, leafy, shady plant, which gives Jonah shade and comfort. The Hebrew word for the plant is kikayon. It's a Hebrew word which is only found in the Book of Jonah. It's the first time this word is ever used, which makes it a hapax legumenon. And that means we have no idea what plant this really is. Ancient rabbis and ancient artists often pictured it as some sort of a gourd plant. So who knows? Maybe. Remember that this book has already used fanciful imagery. Tarshish, a city that we can't put on a map. Nineveh, a city that had been long gone by the authoring of the book. A great fish that swallows Jonah. So a new kind of fanciful plant would fit right in, right? The Lord's provision of shade, protection from the sun, and even from the moon is a common Hebrew Bible concept. You can think of the 121st Psalm, "The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night." You can think of the wings of God tenting over his people for protection. The Jewish wedding chuppah, which is erected over the spot where the bride and groom stands, is designed to evoke just that sentiment. So here is God providing his most decorated prophet of all time with a little R&R. But it's short-lived. In the morning, God provides, there's that word again, a worm to eat the plant. And it does so in just a short time. Again, that must be some worm. We seem to have entered a fantasy world of miraculously growing plants and miraculously devouring worms. And without his beloved plant, Jonah wilts, both physically and emotionally. Again, he begs for death. Twice. in connection with the loss of the plant. Incredulously, God asks Jonah, "Are you so deeply grieved about the plant? Like, are you okay?" God sent an east wind, which is a feature of the prophetic writings found in the book of the prophet Nahum, the book of the prophet Zephaniah, and the book of the prophet Jeremiah, where the east wind is always depicted as a tool of wrath and judgment. Interestingly, in Nahum and Zephaniah, it's Nineveh who gets the judgment of God's east wind. Then the Lord said, "You cared about the plant, which you did not work for, and which you did not grow, which appeared overnight and perished overnight. And should I not care about Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not yet know their right hand from their left, and many beasts as well?" It is here in the final words of the book that the plot and meaning finally come together. While Jonah cared for this little shrub that only existed for a day, God cares for a city of many thousands of people. In the end, God doesn't seem to care that the Ninevites aren't Israelites, that they aren't the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It doesn't matter. They are people made to bear the image of God. Jonah, due to some sort of nationalistic and ethnic hatred of those who aren't Israelites, cares more about a plant. There's an old Jewish midrash that says that when God crashed the Red Sea back together on top of the Egyptian army with their chariots and horses, the angels started cheering. But God commanded silence in the heavens because the Egyptians were his children too. The ending of the book of Jonah seems to line up perfectly with that sentiment. God chose Israel as his own people, but God is the God of the whole earth, all the nations, all the peoples. When speaking to Christian groups, I'd say that this is very, very good news for us because the vast majority of us are Gentiles. We're not the Israelites in the story. We're the people from the rest of the nations. In a sense, Nineveh's salvation paves the way for ours.